For activity 2A, you're going to need two papers from the file. One of them says 2A. It looks like this paper, and then the other one is a coloring paper. We're going to do a color by number. So good writers write with varied sentence types. They write with a variety of simple, compound, and complex sentences. So what we have here are 15 sentences of varying types that you're going to figure out. We know that a simple sentence is one independent clause. We know that a compound sentence is two independent clauses separated by a comma and a coordinating conjunction. And we know that a complex sentence is a subordinating conjunction with a subject and a verb after it, making a dependent clause. So I'm going to tell you the way that I think it's easiest to figure out. I think it's easiest first to look for compound sentences. We look for compound sentences first because they're very distinguishable based on their punctuation and usage, and there are only 7 coordinating conjunctions that we have to know. If I decide that it's not compound, the second type I would look for is to see if it's complex. Again, we have a bank of words that we can use to decide if it has a subordinating conjunction or not. And then if it's not compound or complex, then I've eliminated them and I know it's simple. So I like to do process of elimination. We're going to do a couple together to model this for you, and then you're going to finish it. So it says label each sentence as we do in class to determine if it's simple, compound, or complex. Henry VIII became the King of England when he was only 17 years old. So the first thing I would do is go look for any prepositional phrases, infinitives, or appositives. And I see of England, so I'm going to highlight that. It's a prepositional phrase. And now I can ignore it. Now I'm going to look to see, is the sentence compound? Do I see a comma and a coordinating conjunction in here? And I do not. So I know it's not compound. So I could even cross that out. I know it's not going to be compound. So now I have to decide between complex and simple. So I'm going to look to see, do I see a subordinating conjunction? Henry VIII became the king when he was only 17 years old. And I do. I see when is a subordinating conjunction. When what? When he was only 17 years old. That is a dependent clause. I know it's a dependent clause because it starts with a subordinating conjunction and it has a subject and a verb after it. And then I have an independent clause over here. Henry VIII became the king. Henry VIII is the subject, and became is the verb. So since I have an independent clause plus a dependent clause, then I know that this sentence is complex. Now, if I'm working on question 1, and my answer was complex, it tells me to use the color black. So I'm going to go to my coloring page, and anywhere that I see the number 1, I'm going to color those areas in black. And I'm going to go to the next one. Number 2, he was gifted in jousting and wrestling, and he was well loved for his youthfulness. We start with our process. We look for phrases. I see in jousting, and because I see a conjunction after it, is it in something else? He was gifted in jousting and wrestling, so that's part of that phrase. And I see for is a preposition for his youthfulness. So if I get rid of that, I'm left with he was gifted and he was well loved. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to look first to see, is it compound? Do I see a comma with a coordinating conjunction? And I do. So I'm going to circle it and label it CC. Now, just because I see a comma conjunction does not mean it's compound. I've got to find a subject and a verb on both sides. So I'm going to go over here. He was gifted. He is the subject and was is the verb. Look on the other side. He was well loved. Well, if he was the subject on the other side, he can be the subject again. Same with was. So I have already determined that this sentence is compound. Since this is question number 2 and the answer is compound, I'm looking at the color orange. So I'm going to go to my coloring page, and anywhere that I see the number 2, I'm going to color orange. We're going to do 2 more examples together, and then you are going to finish this page. His subjects adored him until he began murdering his wives. So looking in here, I see until, and I know that until is one of those 5 words that can also be a preposition. So let's say that I thought until he was a prepositional phrase. When you take a prepositional phrase out, you have to have a complete sentence. Well, I'd be left with, his subjects adored him, began murdering his wives. Well, that doesn't really make sense grammatically, and it makes it sound like his subjects began murdering his wives, and I don't think that that's what this means. Let's try if until was a subordinating conjunction. Until what? Until he began murdering his wives. If I take that out, I'm left with his subjects adored him. That works as a sentence. So until is a subordinating conjunction. It has a subject, he, and a verb, began, so I've got a dependent clause. If that's the dependent clause, then this has to be an independent clause. Who is the sentence about? It's not about his. His is always going to be a modifier. His what? His subjects. And what did his subjects do? They adored. So now I see that I have a complex sentence. I could easily, and I should have done that before, but I didn't. I should have ruled out if it was compound. I did not see a comma conjunction anywhere in there, so I knew it wasn't going to be compound. The answer for number 3 is red, so I'm going to go color all in the 3's in red. Number 4, he turned out to be an evil thinker. So I'm going to look for any phrases. I see out, but I don't see a noun after it. It's not like out the door or anything, so I don't think out is a preposition here. I see to followed by be, and I know that's a verb. To be, and in some of my classes we've been talking about how these infinitives have extra words that go along with the phrase to be what? To be an evil thinker. So that helps me. I can get rid of all of that. And my sentence now is he turned out. So I'm going to first look to see, is it compound? Do I see a comma conjunction? I do not. So it's not compound. Then I'm going to look to see, is it complex? Are any of these words subordinating conjunctions? They are not. So that means that this sentence has to be simple. Since this is number 4, I'm going to go find all the yellow, or all the 4's, and color them in yellow. All right, and I feel like 4 is an odd number to start with. We've got, or stop it. We've got 15. I'm going to do one more with you. So I have 1/3 of this done. Henry VIII transformed himself from a beautiful king into Humpty Dumpty, and then he had a great fall. So I'm going to look first for some phrases, and I see the preposition from. From what? From a beautiful king. Into Humpty Dumpty. So I'm going to get rid of 2 phrases. Now I'm going to look for my sentence types. I'm going to look first to see, is it compound? Do I see a comma and a coordinating conjunction? Henry VIII transformed himself, and then he had a great fall. I do. So I'm going to circle that, label it CC. And we know that just because we see a comma conjunction doesn't mean it's compound. It could be a list. So I've got to double check it and make sure there's a subject and a verb on both sides. Henry VIII transformed himself. So Henry VIII is who I'm talking about. He's the subject. What did he do? He transformed. So I've got an independent clause on that side. Then he had a great fall. He is who the sentence is about, referring back to Henry VIII. And what did he do? He had. So I've got an independent clause on that side, so I know that this sentence is compound. So I'm going to go to all the number 5's and color them in blue. All right, so you're going to continue doing this all the way down to number 15. And then when you're done, you can go back to the mastery grid, and there is an exit ticket for you to do where you're just checking in and indicating these answers, because these papers Remember, any paper that gets cut down to this size needs to be glued in your notebook. That way, if you don't finish it today, when we pick up on our mastery grid tomorrow or the next day, you don't lose your papers. It's all glued in there. If you have any questions, go to the mastery grid and let me know, and I'll come help you.